In this commit, we fix a gap that has been sitting in this project since the settings screen shipped. App Preferences exposes a default country flow backed by SQLDelight, and the settings screen already writes to it through set default country. But if you trace who reads that flow before this commit, the answer is nobody. Every one of the 9 feature components, economy, environment, overview, population, science, social, tourism, trade, and transport, launched with a hard-coded country list, always leading with EU 27 2020 and a fixed second country like DE or FR. A user could pick Italy in settings and every single screen in the app would keep showing Germany. This episode walks the real diff. Commit 7B7E1B5 that wires all 9 components to that one persisted preference with a single fetch and no flash of the wrong country. Look at default economy component in economy component.act8. It gains one new constructor parameter, appReferences of type appReferences, injected alongside the existing use case and dispatches. The interesting change is in init. Before this commit, init was a single line. Init calls load, synchronous, no room for a suspend call before the first fetch. Now init wraps both steps in scope. Launch. First apply default country preference, a suspend function, then load. Because scope.launch runs on the same coroutine sequentially, the preference read is guaranteed to complete and mutate component state before load ever executes. This exact same 3-line change, the new constructor parameter plus the scope.launch wrapper around init, appears verbatim in all 8 feature components. Overview gets the analogous treatment too, just wrapping its own start function instead of load. Here is the function itself, private suspend fun apply default country preference, and it is nearly identical across every component. First line, read app preferences, default country.country.first, a one-shot suspend read of the flow, not a long-lived collector. Second line is the guard, if the preferred value is blank, or equal to appReferences.default country, which is the EU 27 2020 aggregate, return immediately, historical behavior is preserved untouched. Otherwise, it sets selected country or active country depending on the component to the preferred code, then it checks whether that code is already in current query code country codes. If not, it copies the list and inserts the preferred code at index 1 when the list already starts with EU 27 and 2020 or index 0 otherwise, so the preference always lands right after the EU aggregate. Then current query is reassigned with that new list before load ever runs, so the very first network query already contains it. Every featurex module.act file needed the matching Koin change. Take feature economy module.act. The component factory lambda used to call default economy component with ctx get dependencies. It now calls it with ctx get 3. That trailing get resolves app preferences from the Koin graph, which is already registered elsewhere as the SQLDelight backed implementation. This one-line diff repeats identically in feature environment module, feature population module, feature science module, feature social module, feature social module, feature tourism module, inter-torsion sport module. Feature overview module.act is slightly different because its constructor call was already multi-line with 8 repository dependencies. It just grows one more get call with a comment /appReferences at the end of that argument list. Default overview component already had its own default country constant D, used as the fallback headline country across all 8 teaser metrics. This commit does not remove that constant, it changes what it means. A new private var headline country initialized to default country becomes the field that apply default country preference actually mutates when a preference is set. The countries list, which used to be a val, becomes a var, so it can be reassigned the same way the other components splice their query. The key line to notice is in pig default, the inline extension function every teaser metric calls. It used to match first or null, where code of it equals default dash country. Now it matches headline country instead, def, count. The constant becomes purely the fallback for when no preference is set. Its doc comment even changes from describing the dashboard's default to describing the fallback headline country. None of this is testable without a fake app preferences, and the commit adds essentially the same private class to all 9 component test files. Fake app preferences takes a default country string, defaulting to app preferences.default as country, and implements the interface with mutable state flow-backed properties, theme preference defaults to theme preference.system, language defaults to app preferences.defaults as a language, and default country wraps whatever was passed into the constructor. The 3 setter functions are no-ops returning unit. This fake only needs to serve reads. Every build component helper function across the 9 test files gains a preferences parameter of type app preferences, defaulting to fake app preferences with no arguments, so every existing test in the suite keeps compiling and passing without a single line of change to its own body. Each suite adds exactly 1 new test named stored default those country, zosk, active those country, either, first those can peri, either, and builds the component with fake app preferences of default country equals it. Feeds the fake repository a result success containing series for IT and DA, then calls advance until idle on the test scheduler. The core assertion checks repo.lastQuery country codes equals the list EU27.query20 IT df RPL, confirming the preference joined right after the EU aggregate. Economy's version of this test goes further and asserts repo.observer count equals 1, proving there was no second fetch triggered by the preference splice. Overview's version instead asserts the economy teaser headlines, Italy's 2022 figure, not Germany's 2023 figure, proving the teaser actually reads headline country. Tourism's test is the interesting edge case. Italy is already in tourism's default country list, so that test instead asserts the query list is completely unchanged, while active country still moves to IT. To summarize, commit 777.1b5 app preferences is now injected into all 9 feature components through Koin. Each one reads default country exactly once inside the scope, launch block in init before its first load or start call, and splices that value into both its active country state and its initial query's country code list. A preference equal to the EU27-2020 default is a no-op, keeping every existing screen's behavior exactly as it was. Changing the preference mid-session is documented as taking effect on the next app start, not live. That live requerying is explicitly out of scope here. 9 test suites, a 115 cases total, all pass against a single shared fake preferences fake. If you want to see every one of these files exactly as they were at this step, run git checkout 7b7e1b5 in the repository and read the diff yourself.